Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Norman Marks. Norman Marks is recognized as a global thought leader in risk management. He is a prolific blogger, author of several books and multiple articles, and a speaker at conferences and seminars around the world. Norman is original thinker with a business rather than a technical risk management perspective. And Norman served as a Chief Risk Officer, Compliance and Ethics Officer for large multinational companies. Norman, thank you for coming to our virtual interview today.
It's my pleasure, Boris. Great to be with everybody.
Thank you. Today we will discuss your new book, Risk Management for Success. In this book, you answer some important questions such as what is world-class risk management? Why do so many top executives and board members have difficulty seeing how ARM makes a positive contribution to the success of their organization? Norman, could you give us to our listeners a little bit more insights about your career path and what led you to write this book?
Sure, thank you, Boris. So, as some of you might be able to tell from my accent, although it's somewhat confusing, I was born and raised in England and moved to the States 40 years ago. My goodness. So I've got a combined career that spans the Atlantic Ocean on both sides, public accounting and then internal audit, in IT management, and then in also as risk officer, compliance, and as you said. And I've always been, although I've been somewhat technical at times, for example, for what is now PwC UK, I was their lead technical IT audit manager, senior manager, who wrote methodologies and things like that. My perspective has always been on what it takes to run the organization and be successful, rather than the nitty-gritty in the weeds kind of things. I've hired people like that. For example, I've hired IT auditors who look first at business process to understand the business before they understand and try and evaluate the IT area. So I always come from, as you said, a business perspective rather than the technical perspective, looking to see what it takes to for the organization to succeed. And what I've seen as it comes to risk management is that it's really not being very effective, not being very successful in a traditional sense. It's people are relying that perhaps based on guidance from regulators and consultants, even the big auditing and accounting firms. They're producing a list of risks, and they're reviewing that list of risks on a periodic basis and thinking that is risk management. Yet any survey of management and executives in the board, they see that what this is about is compliance. And it's not helping them either set the right objectives or then execute the strategies to achieve those objectives. And so it's not getting the funding, it's not getting the support from management on a continuing basis to add value. If you look at surveys, for example, from the ERM Institute at North Carolina State, every year they do this survey, and according to their assessment of maturity, it's less than 10% each time are saying that they're very mature. Something like 7%, I think, in the last few years. 7% of organizations that are responding to a survey on risk management, so it's already a small population, are saying that they have effective and mature risk management. And the next level is somewhat effective. And what the ERM Institute is saying is that that number, which is 21%, is actually going down. So organizations are not seeing the value out of this. So I've been trying for the last several years, this is actually my 5th book on risk management, to actually encourage people to look beyond this and look at it from the customer perspective, from the business perspective, and say, what does the business need? What do the decision makers need? What do the people leading the organization need for them to be able to make the right decisions to lead the organization to success? And it's certainly not, in my opinion, a list of risks. And that's the genesis of the book. And so I've written the things like, don't talk about risks in technical language, talk about it in plain English. I've talked about stop thinking about managing and mitigating risk, think about achieving objectives and what it takes to do that. And then I wanted to write a book about success management as being something better than risk management. I realized that people won't necessarily understand that I'm talking about transforming current day risk management. So I set the title and the topic as risk management for success. So that people eventually will start realizing that what we should be doing is helping the organizations be successful rather than simply avoid failure.
Mm-hmm. So what is the one commonly held belief as it relates to risk management that you would like to debunk in your new book? Or perhaps if we go further, how does someone hearing this for the first time, not experienced, will take action based on your book?
So one of the things that I talk about, especially when I do in-person classes, which we'll do again in 2021, I talk about if you want to persuade somebody to do something, you have to appeal to their WIIFM. WIIFM, for those of you who don't know this, is what's in it for me. So if you want somebody to do something, they have to see some value in it, right? And so what we need to be doing is look at this from the point of view of the people running the business. And what is the information they need in order to set the right objectives, execute day to day, and achieve success. One of the stories I tell is from my friend, I think you know him, Boris, Alexei Sidorenko.
Yeah.
And Alex was the chief risk officer for a very large Russian financial services company in Moscow. And soon after he joined, they were subject, as you might imagine, to all kinds of regulations that required a risk appetite statement and a risk register and all these different reports. And he did all of that, and he had a meeting with the CEO of the company. And the CEO was very, very professional, very courteous, and said, "Thank you, Alex. This looks like you've done an excellent job of meeting all the regulatory requirements. I can see how this is diligent, and I'm sure it's reliable. But if you look at my desk over here, on my desk, you can see a number of different piles of paper. Each one of those represents an important decision that I have to make today or tomorrow. And what you've given me will not help me make any of those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
What you've given me wouldn't have helped me make any of the decisions I've had to make over the last 2 months. So what I'd like you to do is continue to do what you have been doing, because that meets the regulators' requirements. We have to meet the regulators' requirements. But then I want you to meet with my executives and my team and help them get the information, the processes they need to make the right decisions so that we as an organization can achieve our objectives. And that's the transformation that I'm looking for, is to keep complying, but then enable the executives to call what I call informed and intelligent decisions. And then that then involves them taking the right risks in the circumstances because they're justified based upon the reward. And so it's not looking at the downside all by itself. It's looking at the ability to weigh the consequences of a decision or lack of a decision and balancing the pros and the cons so that you can now know, okay, which is the right thing to do. And that's really, to me, is what it's all about. It's not about just the downside. It's about seizing the upside as well,
Mm-hmm.
but recognizing that anything that we do, any decision, anything that happens has multiple effects. Not just one bad side. It could be multiple bad effects. It could be multiple good effects. And you've got to, as we do in our personal lives, we've got to make a balanced decision. Like I talk about, I've written about this. when we are making a decision, for example, what car to buy, we don't look at a risk register.
Yeah.
We make a list of all the pros and the cons for each vehicle, right? And then we make an intelligent decision as to which one. Now, if we do that in our personal lives, why are we doing something different in our professional lives? Why can't we help the executive understand the ramifications and consequences, the effects of any particular action or situation, both the pros and the cons, so that they can make the right decision? And that, I think, is a thrust, is transforming what we're doing so that the executives, the decision makers, are not just doing what they have to do, they're doing what they want to do. And we're helping them with the analysis and assessment of information on both sides, the pros and the cons, so they can see the whole picture and make the right decision. Unfortunately, Boris, I've talked to a number of risk practitioners, and I say, well, you have all of these tools to evaluate bad things that might happen. Why don't you do that on the good things that might happen? And they say, well, that's somebody else's job.
Yeah, exactly.
That's somebody else's job. So here we are evaluating the downside in a very disciplined, structured fashion, and somebody is used throwing guesswork and optimism on the upside, and then you've got the executive sitting there in the middle thinking, what am I supposed to do now? How can I make an intelligent decision? I've got you on this side only ever telling me that the sky is going to fall. You've got these on the other side painting a rosy picture, and you're making me guess as to what I'm supposed to do.
So if there is one thing that the risk managers should start doing right now that they are not doing currently, what would it be? Or perhaps another way around. Is there one thing that risk managers should stop doing now that they are doing? What would it be based on your book or your thinking?
Well, one thing they should stop doing is stop talking about risk and managing and mitigating risk. Our job, if we do not take risk, we will never succeed.
Exactly.
Okay, it's not about accepting risk. We've got to take risk. The thing is to take the right risk, given the circumstances. So I think we need to stop thinking of ourselves as responsible for managing risk. We're there to help them, and if we are to help the decision makers and executives, the thing we have to do is meet with them, understand what decisions they make, how they make decisions, what information they are using and could use, which is better. And then we can step back and say, how can we help them do a better job? Look, Boris, I had, when I was talking about risk management in plain English and risk being a four-letter word that we want to try and avoid because it sets people off in a negative fashion. It really turns executives off. I'm here to talk to you about risk. Oh my goodness. You're here to stop me doing what I need to do, right? Exactly. You're an obstacle to my progress. You're an obstacle to my running the business. So I was talking about this and writing about this, and somebody wrote a comment on my blog that said that they had changed the name of their department from risk management to decision support.
Oh.
and all of a sudden, the executives will welcome them in, because that difference in mindset of we are here to help, how can we help? How can we help give you the information and insight you need into all the things that might happen, is appealing to them, because you're now saying, I'm going to help you be personally and organizationally successful.
But it's not allowed to be in kind of financial companies. They have to be a precise risk management department or something like this.
Well, so here's another story for you, Boris. So another friend of mine, Martin Davies, in Singapore, you know Martin. He's a very, very smart guy and a great technician, as is Alex. But he was a risk officer for, I think it might have been in Australia, but anyway, he was another financial services company, a trading company. And he was a risk officer. And the traders typically would propose a new financial instrument they wanted to trade. And that would go to the risk officer. The risk officer would take that, run it through a sophisticated model, and determine whether it met the defined parameters for it being acceptable. And most of them would just say yes or no. And if no, go away. What Martin did, yes, that's easy. If it was no, he would look at it, he would understand what the trader is trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would go back to the trader and say, if you change this here and that there, it'll meet the guidance and it'll do what you want. So he changed from the department of no to the department of how.
All right.
He changed from being an obstacle to being an enabler and a partner and helping them actually make the right decision. And it's that kind of mental shift. So we're hurt in some ways again, because we have this idea that the risk officer is there to stop people taking too much risk. And they see themselves as there to be the sheriff in town and stop those rowdy cowboys doing something to damage the organization. Instead of saying, my job is to help the organization succeed. Now, how can I do that better? I'm not there just to stop people. I'm there to help people understand perhaps why it's not good. But basically, I'm there to provide them the information, the process, the tools, the insight, the advice, so that we as an organization can be successful. So it's a mental shift.
Yeah, interesting. So I know in many organizations, risk management is seen not as a strategic partner, but rather a cost of doing business. So what do you see as the main role of risk manager, risk officer? Is it a policeman, a checkbox ticker, or trusted advisor, or else? And what is the risk culture? Maybe you can weave here. This is kind of vague description as risk culture, how to embed it in an organization. I always hear this in all conferences: risk culture, but nobody knows what does it mean.
I think if the risk practitioner sees themselves not as the policeman, but as the partner to the organization. Now, there are times when the partner has to be an adult and say to the child, you know, you're doing something which may seem right to you, but it's wrong for the organization. And so there are going to be times when tactfully and diplomatically you need to escalate it, right? But most of the time, you're there to help that person be successful. And if we really have that attitude, I think that can be the right thing. And the risk police, no. No, that is, you're never going to get anybody to want you to come in and work with them if you see yourself as a policeman, right? They're going to see that you have hidden agendas. I've had people tell me that one of my staff presented and they didn't trust him because they felt he had a hidden agenda. He wasn't there really. He was there to catch them out and make himself look good at their expense instead of actually making them look good. And that's what we should be doing. I'll come back to risk counsel in a minute, but one of the ways I feel you should evaluate risk management and see whether it's successful is whether the people making the decisions, people running the business say, yes, risk management is actually helping me and the organization be successful. I want them to come in for this reason and this reason and this reason, not to stop me from doing something wrong. Maybe that's okay. But generally speaking, is to be an advisor, because I know they're on my side. I know we have the same shared values and the same objectives. And so I want them to come in because they're actually adding value to me personally, as well as to the organization. Now, the risk council or risk committee, which is what I'm more used to, and that's what I set up when I was chief risk officer. I think they're there to make sure that everybody understands the process to help train people in the right decision-making processes. If there are compliance requirements to make sure that that is communicated and so on. There's also a need sometimes for a forum to have a discussion where multiple departments are affected by the same situation and they have to make a decision together. So this can be an area below the executive committee of the organization where you can tackle specific issues where you've got disagreement perhaps between department heads. So I think there is some logic there, but it's you've really got to look at it and say, how can these executives come together and add value to themselves and to the organization as a whole? So I think that they're too often set up again as a compliance committee rather than and to approve policies and things like that, which none of the executives really want to spend their time doing. They're really not interested in spending an hour reviewing and approving fine print in a risk policy. But if you talk to them about how can we as an organization make better decisions, then I think that there's some value.
Okay, interesting. So let's jump. What is your take on current software solution for risk management? I know you probably implemented hundreds of solutions during your career path. And what are your tips on selecting them? Because in our community, we have a lot of questions and people always asking about that solution or another solution.
Right. Well, first of all, I do tiniest bit of consulting. I retired quite a few years ago now. And so although I was looking at solutions for my own organization, and I talk to companies and I talk to software vendors today, I'm independent of any of them. And I don't recommend any particular software company. What I have been saying all the time is you have to understand what you want to achieve with risk management and decision making and the management of the organization, and define your needs, and then go and buy the best, maybe combination of solutions in order to achieve those best. There's very few software products that I've seen that do everything that I would want. And I was very encouraged. I don't know whether you saw it, Boris, but Michael Rasmussen recently wrote a blog talking about RFPs for risk management. And I think he got it very much right when he said it has to do with achieving objectives. And unfortunately, most software vendors, when it comes to risk management solutions, there's no link to objectives at all. It's all about traditional list of risks. It's not about achieving objectives. Now, the good news is that over the last month, I've talked to a number of different companies that are now developing solutions. In fact, some of them are actually developing solutions mirroring some of the thoughts in my books, which is very flattering. And they're saying that it starts with achieving objectives. And as I say in my books, how can we have an acceptable likelihood of achieving those objectives? Okay, I want to achieve my objectives, and it's I want a 90% likelihood of achieving objectives. But they are designing their solutions around that, and then understanding what might happen to achieve them. And that's very, very encouraging indeed. Some of these companies are building some very sophisticated tools and techniques to do that, enabling much more continuous risk management of what might happen, risk and opportunity, because you need to look at both sides, risk and opportunity, so that people can not only make the right decision, but then revisit and correct a decision if it turns out that things aren't working out the way in which they expected. So I think, my advice to everybody is, first of all, understand what you're trying to achieve. Okay, and hopefully in my book, I've put a maturity model in there talking about a lot of things that I believe should be considered for effective management of the organization,
Okay.
from setting the right objectives to tactical and strategic decision making, all the way through to evaluating the things that might happen and bringing that back to assess the likelihood of achieving the objectives.
Mhm.
So understand what you want to do, define your needs, and then determine the best way to achieve those. And it could take some time, and it could take, frankly, some number of different products.
Mhm. Okay, maybe last question about your process as as an author, because I myself trying to write something as a book, but it it makes me very very sick. So what kind of research do you do, or maybe you just write as you hear something from the God or something? How long do you spend researching before beginning the book? And have you even gotten a writer block or something like this?
I've never really had writer's block. Touch wood, won't happen. So, as you know, because I blog all the time, I read a lot, and I read a lot of different articles and studies and thought leadership pieces. Each one of those makes me think about what the person is saying, learning from that as much as anything else. And sometimes it's trying to say, why do I not like what they're saying? So that is a major part of it. And then once I have something that I figure I want to write about because I think that people need to make a change, and perhaps I can influence to some modest degree the change that they're making. Once I have that, I have some idea of not so much the structure, but the overall message and what the sort of things I need to include. And the next thing I do, Boris, is I go out and get the best people I can find to be on my review panel.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, because as I'm writing, it depends on the nature of the book as to whether it makes sense to do it as I'm doing it or once I've completed a large part. For example, on this last one, I put more of a high-level maturity model together, talking about the things that I wanted to talk about, and sent that to my reviewers, and they gave me very constructive feedback. I was really going a little bit too far, um, and the book actually turned out to be much more lengthy. I mean, the maturity model itself is about 50 pages long, very comprehensive, and the idea is pick and choose from it. But then I put it together. I probably reread it and re-edit it 3 or 4 times.
Well, like
if
Leon
that's
Tolstoy, Leon Tolstoy, he wrote about and he rewrote about 20 times his War and Peace novel.
I can just imagine how long that took. And then I send it to them, and then they are able to. And I pick people that are going to be critical. They have different perspectives, different experiences. So I don't necessarily pick people that I know are going to like everything I have to say. I pick people from different perspectives. And so I was very lucky. I got a dozen people from all over the world and different backgrounds and different perspectives who contributed. They don't necessarily all agree with everything I've said, but I think that they definitely enrich it. But the thing for me is that I have a passion for the topic. I have a passion for helping people in general. I think I have something to say, and I want, if nothing else, I want to make people think. Even if they disagree with me, I want them to feel challenged in what they have been doing and thinking. And perhaps over time, we'll see some progress. And I have to say, Bryce, I'm very pleased to see a lot of the comments on my blog these days of so many people moving in the same direction as I am. Whereas when I started, which is now quite a long time ago, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, I wouldn't say that people are necessarily on the same page as me.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I started Global Risk Community, you almost your blog was only, I think, only risk management blog that I saw. Yeah, maybe Michael Davis also. Davis. Yeah, I think. Okay. All right. Thank you, Norman, for your interview. If someone would like to read the book, we will put a link in either a podcast show notes or in the blog post, depending on where you consuming this interview content. I would like I wish you good luck and successfully producing another books for risk managers. And the most important thing is that your ideas will be implemented into practice.
Thank you very much, Boris. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.